Let's talk about VR and the way things are developing with the industry at the moment. Now, VR's come a long way since it first popped up, and with everything that's going on at E3, it's definitely here to stay. No longer confined only to the realms of PC gaming enthusiasts, Sony and Microsoft have now both announced their support with PlayStation VR and Project Scorpio, respectively. And just in case that wasn't enough, Razer have also announced they're on board with open source VR, which is just fantastic any way you slice it. Even as somebody who honestly isn't really that interested in VR, I can't help but keep an eye on its development. Unfortunately, things can't ever just be easy. Smooth seas, it would seem, only exist in the dreams of the most inexperienced sailor, and most of the rough tide started showing up around March 2014, when Facebook decided to purchase Oculus for a whopping $2 billion in combined cash and stocks. Now, to be fair, I can't really blame them for selling out like they did. You offer me that much dosh, and you can name your terms, I will have a real difficult time turning you down no matter what you say. But the moment they sold out, everyone kind of just knew it would be downhill from there. We hoped that it wouldn't, we hoped that Facebook would prove us wrong, but it all kind of turned out to be in vain. Facebook basically have a license to print money at this point, and they can pump as much of that into Oculus as they see fit. They could have exponentially improved the development of the VR industry as a whole, but despite what Zuckerberg promised us, we knew that they wouldn't just leave Oculus to run independently. And to nobody's surprise, they didn't. Now you've got Oculus Rift headsets that fire a ton of information back to Facebook HQ, and this isn't anonymized user statistics like we've come to expect. This includes information about the device you're using, what other software you have on it, location data. Now, I'm not going to sit here and sing you the evils of Facebook. I have an account with them just like everyone else, and I know full well what their business model is with regards to accessing their social network. But when it comes to other devices, I know I'm not really the only one that's okay with the Rift collecting this kind of information. And I mean, that's not even all of it. There's a part of the EULA that says they can market to you, although how they quite plan to do that, I'm not sure. But all I know is if my headset started playing a McDonald's advert halfway through a round of Counter-Strike, I would be throwing it in the bin. Now, it's not like any of this actually came as a surprise. It is Facebook after all. Facebook like to get a hold of as much information on you as they can and hawk it off to whoever can write them the fattest check. That's Facebook's entire business model, and regardless of how you feel about the morality of it, it's undeniable that they're very successful at what they do. But let's briefly move away from the big bucks and the money involved and take a step back to appreciate VR headsets for what they are. They're mostly a combination of display technology, and in some cases, controller technology. Now, I don't know about you, but if my monitor or my mouse prompted me to start sending usage data to potential advertisers, I wouldn't be signing off on that. No, I like my peripherals like I like my Meeseeks. They perform the function I got them for, and they do nothing else. So what's the other option? You could always not buy a Rift and instead throw your money at the HTC Vive, right? Well, yes and no. As much as we, the consumer, have the ability to pick and choose what hardware we open our wallets to support, a lot of people are kind of stuck because they've already funded Oculus before Facebook's involvement, money that a lot of people have openly said they wouldn't have given if they'd have known what would happen down the line. However, in the interest of fairness, I will admit, you always have that kind of risk with any business you support, especially a crowd-funded up-and-comer. Everyone knew that if their product could do what they claimed it could, there was zero chance a bigger company wasn't going to buy them out once they got off the ground. I guess we were all just hoping it would have been Corsair or somebody already established in the video game industry. But now I'm drifting off topic. More than the creepy and invasive data collection, the bigger barrier to VR is Oculus buying out titles with exclusivity. And this isn't like we're talking about Xbox exclusives or PlayStation exclusives where you're limited by what platform you're playing the game on. Those, whilst annoying, are at least somewhat understandable because you're developing for completely different sets of hardware. But games utilising VR, up until now, have mostly been made for the PC. The PC has such a broad spectrum of hardware that anybody in their right mind shouldn't even begin to consider hardware exclusivity. It all brings me back to my earlier point of what a VR headset actually is. It's a gaming peripheral, not a gaming platform. Can you imagine if you bought a new keyboard and suddenly you couldn't play half your games anymore? I mean, it's bad enough we have Nvidia sabotaging the gaming industry by using GameWorks to gimp the performance on AMD cards. And even with a 980 Ti in my rig, I'll openly admit that's a practice they need to knock on the head sharpish. But now we have a hardware vendor trying to tie your games to a specific peripheral. The Oculus Store has such a disconnect when compared to any other gaming storefront. I can't natively buy something on there and play it using a Vive, but if I buy a game on Steam or Origin, for example, I can go ahead and play that on any PC I like, provided it meets the minimum specification. And I can still access that store or my account from any device. Hardware vendor lock-in is a terrible idea and it should not be supported. Yes, there's the Revive project that's working on making software cross-compatible, but it shouldn't be left to modders to circumvent DRM just so that they can use a different device to play a game they purchased legally. Quick moment to throw out an honourable mention to the guys at Crow Team. Word is that they turned down what could only be described as a shit ton of money to make Serious Sam VR The Last Hope exclusive to the Rift, or at least debut on the Oculus store first. There's some debate about the exact nature of the offer. Either way, it's fantastic to see someone openly telling Oculus to back off with their aggressive marketing practice. Even Gabe Newell has weighed in about Oculus exclusivity, saying he, and presumably HTC, want to keep VR open, and not wanting to try and develop Vive into a VR gatekeeper. And let's face it, when the CEO of a company renowned for its awful customer service is saying your business model is kind of a bad idea, you know you done goofed. Although, speaking of Valve, I'm delighted to hear that they're actually offering developers money to not buy into exclusivity. It's not quite free money, it's more like an interest-free loan, but Valve are describing it as prepaid Steam revenue, which I presume to mean if they release on Steam, they pay that money back out of their profits, but since they agree to not be exclusive, they can sell through any other channel they like, and they get to keep all of that money. Now, I'm not the kind of person to blindly praise Valve for everything they do. We all know that Greenlight is terrible, their customer service is non-existent, and their gamification of sales just feels shady to me. But I think that this is a pretty reasonable move. Valve are taking a bit of the gamble and sinking a possible loss up front to ensure the games are going to get released for a device they're backing, the Vive. From a company that, similar to Facebook, more or less have a license to print money, it makes a lot of sense. Games cost money to make, and I expect Oculus are so easily able to buy out devs with their exclusivity bullshit because there's not too many other ways the developers can raise that money if they're not being bankrolled by a publisher already. Valve's non-exclusivity offer is another avenue they can use to keep things afloat until they're ready to release, and as consumers, we stand to benefit a lot from it. Competition is always good. Alright, that's all I got for now. Thanks for listening. Game over.